Chris, you've been also working as head of curriculum for Green School. And I wonder what you've experienced in your time with the program, whether parents are saying, oh, this curriculum is too open or it's too student-led. Do you ever hear that? And if so, what do you say to that?
I think, Becky, given our size, most of our parents are self-selecting at the moment. So most of our parents have thought long and hard about Green School New Zealand before they come. So one has to be a little cautious. I can't pretend for a second that the entire world would look at Green School New Zealand and say, oh yes, that's absolutely for me. But I think what I am discovering increasingly is this. And if people will indulge me for 30 seconds, I've done quite a bit of research recently into the history of examinations. Because people talk about examinations and high-stake testing as if they've been around for hundreds, thousands of years in the West. And examinations were imported from China, who were using them admittedly for 2,000 years, the Chinese Civil Service, by Jesuit priests in the 17th century. Would you believe the first recorded examination as we would understand it in Europe took place in 1702? That's what kind of a bore I've become. The first standard assessment test took place in 1850. It's a real post-industrial revolution thing. So first of all, examinations have not been around for a long time, certainly in this tradition. And what I've discovered, I took a Maori politician around Green School New Zealand, a gentleman who had a lot of influence locally. And I explained what we were doing, multi-age teaching, no lockstep teaching. We don't have every 9-year-old learning exactly the same thing as every other 9-year-old at exactly the same time. And if you pass the test, you're a clever 9-year-old. And if you don't pass the test, you're not. Instead, of course, we have the multi-age. We have an expansive curriculum, which Leslie, to some extent, has described. After I toured Green School, this gentleman, who was a very powerfully built man, and for me it made the story rather more moving. I suspect he'd been a superb rugby player in his day. He had a tear in his eye, and he said, what you're doing chimes so congruently with Maori tradition. Can you imagine if we'd all gone hunting a few hundred years ago, but we'd only taken 9-year-olds because it was the 9-year-old hunting day, and they all had to throw the spear in exactly the same way. And I was explaining to him how this curriculum captures all those people who would have been lost when I was at school. When I was at school, what about the entrepreneurial thinker who wasn't very good at exams? Gone, lost. They'd have failed. I happened to be good at exams. I got lucky. I was in the right place at the right time. So as long as the parents come with a growth and open mindset, I think they can be persuaded. And I keep saying it, they're persuaded through research. We're not making this stuff up. We can look back to the Maori tradition, or you can look at Harvard and Oxford University and read what people are actually saying. And my final point here is, of course, so many billions of dollars are invested in the status quo. Nobody's going to pretend this is easy. There are people all over the world setting examinations and marking examinations and entry procedures that rely entirely upon examinations. Over the decades, I think it has to be dismantled, and in its own small way, I think Green School has started that process. And then perhaps the final point from me, because it's something I feel passionately about, we have joined something called the Mastery Transcript Consortium, which is a bit of a mouthful, but essentially is a digital curation and a university transcript of your learning journey. So rather than simply say, you have scored 40% in quadratic equations, you actually chart a 3-year learning journey, much of which will be academic in the traditional sense, but will also involve transferable skills, actually your emotional and empathetic abilities, your entrepreneurial skills, your ability to change people's minds. And I'm so excited about that. And that is structured and formal, and it is there for all to see. There's nothing airy-fairy about this. It's just profoundly different, and in many ways actually harking back as much as it looks forward.